My grandfather left clues about hidden treasure, but only I knew he'd already given it all to me. Standing in my grandfather's dusty attic 3 weeks after his funeral, I watched my cousins tear through boxes with the desperation of pirates hunting for gold. They'd found the first clue tucked inside his old leather journal, a cryptic riddle about finding what matters most where memories live longest. My uncle was convinced it led to a fortune in gold coins or bearer bonds, something that would change all our lives forever. The thing is, while they were busy deciphering his elaborate treasure map with its X marks and compass directions, I already knew the truth. The real treasure wasn't hidden in some secret compartment or buried in the backyard behind the oak tree where we used to build forts. It was sitting right there in my bank account, quietly growing interest for the past 15 years. My grandfather had been slipping me money since I was 12 years old, $20 here, 50 there, always with the same instruction. He'd press the bills into my palm during family gatherings and whisper that I should save it for something special, something that would make me happy when I was older. At first, I spent it on video games and candy, but as I got older, something about his serious expression made me start putting it away instead. The amounts got bigger as I went through high school and college. Sometimes he'd hand me a $100 bill for my birthday. Other times he'd write me a check for helping him clean out his garage or fix his fence. He always acted like it was payment for odd jobs, but I knew better because he paid my cousins too, and they never got nearly as much as I did. During my senior year of college, when I was stressing about student loans and wondering how I'd ever afford a decent car, he called me over one evening after a family dinner. He led me to his study, the same room where he'd taught me to play chess and helped me with my math homework for years. That night he opened his desk drawer and pulled out an envelope thick with cash, more money than I'd ever seen in one place. He explained that he'd been saving for decades, putting away money from his pension and Social Security, living more modestly than he needed to because he wanted to give his grandchildren a head start in life. But he'd been watching us all grow up, and he'd decided that I was the one who would use it wisely. He said my cousins were too focused on instant gratification, always buying the latest gadgets or clothes, never thinking about the future. The envelope contained $15,000, and he made me promise to put it in a savings account and not tell anyone about it. He said the rest of the family wouldn't understand. They'd think he was playing favorites or being unfair. He was right, of course, because even then I could see how jealous my cousins got when he paid extra attention to me or praised my grades at family gatherings. Over the next few years, he continued adding to my secret nest egg, sometimes calling me over to help with yard work and slipping me another envelope. By the time I graduated and started working, I had almost $40,000 saved up, enough for a down payment on a small house in a decent neighborhood. I never told him, but I'd started investing some of it in index funds like he'd taught me, and it was growing faster than either of us had expected. The last time we talked about money was 6 months before he died, when he was getting weaker but still sharp as ever. He called me to his bedside and told me he was proud of how I'd handled everything, how I'd saved and invested wisely instead of blowing it all on nonsense. He said he had one more gift for me, a final addition to what he called my future fund. That final gift was another $20,000, bringing my total to just over $60,000 with the investment gains. He made me promise again to keep it secret, at least until after he was gone. He said he knew it would cause problems with the family, but he wanted me to have the security he'd never had when he was young. Now, watching my cousins and uncles frantically searching through his belongings, following clues to a treasure that didn't exist, I felt this weird mix of sadness and guilt. Part of me wanted to tell them the truth, that Grandpa had already given away his treasure, that they were wasting their time looking for something that was already gone. But I also knew that revealing the truth would destroy what was left of our family relationships. My youngest cousin found the second clue hidden behind a picture frame in the living room, and everyone gathered around as he read it out loud. It was another riddle about finding wisdom where knowledge was kept, and they all rushed to the basement where Grandpa had kept his old books and papers. I followed along, playing my part in the treasure hunt, all while knowing that the real treasure was safely deposited in my investment account, growing by the day. The basement search turned up the third clue, and this one sent everyone into a frenzy because it seemed to point to something valuable hidden in the walls of the house. My uncle actually started tapping on the walls with a hammer, listening for hollow sounds that might indicate a secret compartment. My aunt was measuring distances from the clues, trying to triangulate the exact location where X marked the spot. As the hours passed and the search grew more desperate, I started to understand what my grandfather had really been doing. This wasn't just about giving me money, it was about teaching me something about family, about greed, about how quickly people could turn against each other when they thought there was something valuable at stake. He'd created this elaborate treasure hunt knowing it would reveal everyone's true character. The fourth clue led them to the old shed behind the house, where they spent another hour digging through paint cans and garden tools. My uncle was getting frustrated, muttering about how the old man had always been too clever for his own good. My cousins were starting to argue about who would get what share of the treasure when they found it, even though they hadn't found anything yet. That's when I realized the most twisted part of Grandpa's plan. He hadn't just given me the money to help me get ahead in life. He'd done it to show me exactly what would happen to our family when people thought there was easy money to be found. Every greedy look, every argument about splitting the non-existent treasure, every moment of desperation I was witnessing, it was all a lesson about human nature that he'd planned for me to see. The fifth clue was the cruelest one yet, because it seemed to promise that the treasure was finally within reach. It sent everyone back to the attic, where they started pulling up floorboards and checking behind the insulation. My cousin actually brought in a metal detector, sweeping it over every inch of the floor, while the rest of us watched hopefully. The detector beeped a few times, but it was just finding old nails and screws, nothing valuable. By evening, when the treasure hunt had been going on for almost 12 hours, people were starting to get tired and cranky. My uncle suggested that maybe the clues were just a game, that there might not be any real treasure at all. That's when my aunt pulled out the final clue, which had been taped to the bottom of Grandpa's favorite chair the whole time. The last clue was different from the others, written in Grandpa's careful handwriting, but with a more serious tone. It said that the real treasure wasn't gold or money, but the memories we'd made together and the love we'd shared as a family. It was the kind of sentimental message that should have brought everyone together, but instead it just made everyone angry. My uncle crumpled up the paper and threw it across the room, cursing about how the old man had wasted their entire day with his stupid jokes. My cousins started complaining about how they'd driven hours to get there, how they'd taken time off work, how they'd gotten their hopes up for nothing. The whole family was falling apart right in front of me, exactly like Grandpa had predicted. That's when I understood the final lesson he'd been trying to teach me. The money he'd given me wasn't just a head start in life, it was protection from becoming like them. He'd seen how greed could destroy a family, how the promise of easy money could turn decent people into something ugly and desperate. By giving me the treasure in advance, he'd made sure I'd never have to fight for it, never have to lose my dignity scrambling for scraps. As everyone started packing up their things and heading home, disappointed and angry, I felt this overwhelming sense of gratitude for what my grandfather had really given me. It wasn't just the money, though that was certainly life-changing. It was the wisdom to understand that true wealth isn't something you fight for or take from others. It's something you build slowly and share generously. The next morning, I drove to the bank and looked at my account balance for the first time in months. With the market gains and compound interest, my grandfather's gifts had grown to almost $75,000. I could buy a house, start a business, or just let it keep growing for my own retirement. But more importantly, I had the security of knowing that I'd never have to depend on anyone else for my financial future. I also had the memory of watching my family tear itself apart over money that didn't exist, and the knowledge that I'd been protected from that fate by a man who'd loved me enough to teach me hard lessons about life. My grandfather had given me more than treasure. He'd given me the understanding that real wealth comes from making smart choices and treating people with respect, not from chasing get-rich-quick schemes. A few weeks later, when the family had cooled down and started talking again, my uncle mentioned that he'd been thinking about Grandpa's final message. He said maybe the old man had been right about the real treasure being family and memories, even if it was disappointing not to find any actual money. I just nodded and agreed, keeping my secret safe like I'd promised. Sometimes I wonder if I should have told them the truth, if it would have made them feel better to know that Grandpa had at least left something valuable behind, even if they couldn't share in it. But then I remember how they'd looked at each other during the treasure hunt, how quickly they'd started arguing about money they'd never even found, and I know that Grandpa made the right choice. The real treasure wasn't the money sitting in my bank account, though that was certainly nice to have. The real treasure was the lesson about integrity, about the difference between people who work for what they have and people who just expect it to be handed to them. My grandfather had spent his whole life building wealth slowly and carefully, and he'd passed that wisdom along to the one person in the family who he thought would use it responsibly. Now, whenever I'm tempted to make a quick decision about money or take a shortcut that might hurt someone else, I think about that treasure hunt and how ugly it made everyone look. I think about my grandfather's careful planning, how he'd saved and invested for decades so he could give me opportunities he'd never had. I think about the trust he'd placed in me to use his gifts wisely, and I try to live up to that trust every day. The money is still growing in my investment accounts, and I've added to it with my own savings and smart financial choices. But the real treasure, the lesson about character and integrity, and the importance of planning for the future, that's something that can't be measured in dollars and cents. That's something that will stay with me forever, a gift from a grandfather who loved me enough to teach me how to live well.